Hey there, Dango Stu here. Today's video is about finishing the hull work on the steel trawler and is proudly sponsored by MarineEngine.com. Sorry, the footage for this one's a little bit scrappy. I still haven't got my good camera back. The battery went flat on my backup camera, and I also managed to delete the project off my hard drive. So I've put together what I've got, and hopefully it gives you an idea of where we're at now. The other thing I need to do today is get in the lazarette and unbolt all these fittings. I'm not planning to add a marlin board just yet, and if I did it would go the whole width of the transom anyway, and then you've got the wet exhaust coming onto it, so I'll deal with that later. There are a couple of other stainless fittings here and here, and you can see where they've really eaten away the mild steel. So I'll go and unbolt those, have a look where the ribs are, then we'll cut this plate out and replace a piece here. So a few things I've got to do. I've got to get these bags of concrete out, this ballast. I need to get it out so that I can brush all the, and sort of sand all the loose paint off the transom there and reprime and paint there. I may as well do where the doublers went on. They've been on for a long time and it never got repainted after they were put on. Personally, I think these bags of concrete make really bad ballast in that not only are they heavy, these are actually old 40 kilo bags, not the new sort of 20s you see more commonly, but they set. And once they're set, they really wedge in, and if there's lips and things like this, you can't get it past it. So I'm actually going to have to get some sort of jackhammer type thing in here and break it up in order to get it out. My plan is to replace it with something that won't set. So I'm even thinking something like a garnet bag, something that maybe would have a use at some point. So it's not just dead weight, it's something that you could use and then replace, you know, obviously before you go to sea. The other option is to replace it with something like lead shot in a plastic bag. Because the lead's more dense than concrete, it'll take up less space, so it'll lower the centre of gravity. It'll conform to the shape of the bilge that it's sitting in. And that'll give me more room for storage because it doesn't have the same volume. But so a couple of options there. Anyway, why was I here? That's right, I'm taking nuts off. Gotta say, as well as giving me more room in the engine room, getting rid of the wet exhaust would free up all this space. Make it easier to get into this space rather than climbing under now. And you know, this could be a good location for a freshwater tank or something instead of a part of the exhaust system. It's obviously the hole saw they used when they cut the wet exhaust out. Alright, this is that hole from the outside, so we can see we're nowhere near any ribs, so I can just cut out whatever I want and replace it. Alright, old bit out, patch in. Yes, I forgot to round the corners, but never mind. This one's well above the waterline, so I might actually use this as my test one, see if I do get any problems from the square corners or not. I've been recommended not just to even do the small drill bit, but even get a hole saw, do sort of, 20 or 30 mil radiuses on the corner. But didn't happen this time. Anyway, we'll keep an eye on it. At least I can see it all the time. Filled the bolt holes with weld. Now I'm just going to clean up the exhaust a little bit with a wire wheel, then I'll jump inside and we'll weld the inside of the patch out. I've been doing a bit of welding inside the cabin, welding the inside of some of these patches. It's getting a bit fumey in there, so I'm just going to let it, breathe for a bit. What I'm going to try in the meantime, while it does that, is see if I can get this timber wrapping strip off. It looks like there's just bolt heads at this end, so there may be some type of captivated nut inside the hull. It looks like once they've got the bolt in, they've just filled around the head with some sort of filler. So I'm going to see if I can chip that out and get a socket in onto this nut and see what happens. Yeah, it looks like a bolt head with a washer behind it, so let's get a socket onto this. Oh, that wasn't too hard. So that's good. I'm going to get these timber strips off because getting the sponsons cleaned up to paint is pretty much the next job. Then I can sand and seal this timber while it's off the boat and then just reinstall it. So yeah, just nuts welded onto the hull here. The only real rust seems to be at the front here, so I'll get the needle gun onto this, clean it up, see if we need to pad weld, whatever we need to do before we put the timber back on. As cool as the Scrabble gun, needle gun is, it's amazing what you can get off with just a chipping hammer. The only part I'm thinking of replacing, rather than trying to repair, is this back section. This is where I welded on my earth for doing other welding, and it's too thin to sort of pad weld, so I think I'll cut this section out, bend it up, put it in, replace it. So today's job is to cut this section out here. It's quite thin and there's a couple of bolt holes in it anyway, so I'm going to replace that. You can see the extent of the pitting a bit more on the inside. Some of it's bad on the outside there, some of it's bad on the inside here. So just going to replace this whole section. Sorry, just realised my video camera battery had gone flat. What I've done here is just run a quick weld down the side of this patch. Then while it's still warm from the welding, I'm just hammering it around the outside here of the sponson to get the right shape. Then I'll just break it off from this weld, cut the old bit out and set it in. Okay, old bit cut off now. Now what I'm going to do is, I had to do some straight cuts up with the angle grinder here and down obviously. So I'm going to get the grinder now and just smooth this curve off a bit. Then we'll just continue to test fit the new bit. I've got to bend it a bit further at this end, but that's okay, we can cope with that and get it welded out. So just welding around, closing the gap as I go until we get to this end. Sorry, I don't have a tripod for the phone, but it's getting there. Hopefully you get the idea. I need to lift the floor here in order to get to the hull below it, and the front of the bunk here is on the floor, so I'll start taking that out. It's just more of the little nuts here, but at least you can get to them because there's the hatches, removable hatches on the top of the bunk, so that's not so bad. The top bolts are even easier, they're just here under the mattress. And just to keep the 100% record going, this one nut's a different size to all the others. So, now we can get the floor up and see what we see under there. I'm glad I lifted this up because there's definitely a bit of rust. It's actually the only internal rust I've found on the whole boat so far. So we'll chip that up, measure the thickness, prime it, or plate it if we need to. Alright, just going to heat the top arc of this old sounder mounting, transducer mounting, and then give it a few hits from the inside. I can't find the heating tip, the rose tip at the moment, but this will do. Unfortunately, this section's inside the bunk upstairs, so I can't actually get a full swing with a hammer. But we'll see if I can get it to pop a little bit. Oh. Doesn't look like it's budged at all. hard pressed to say it's much better. When I was inside, because it's a bit dark in there, I could actually see it glowing red all the way around here. But I just can't get any real backswing on the hammer to give it a good hit. What I might do now is just let it cool and see if as it cools it comes forward a bit too. I did a bit of homework on line heating and how it works. So it'll be interesting to see whether heating on the outside means it then ultimately shrinks further on the outside and pops out a bit on its own. So I'll let it cool again. Then I've also got the Porta Power kind of paddle beaters, hydraulic, rams that I can maybe rig something up and actually use hydraulic power to press it out while I heat. That might work better as well. Coming into the cabin here was a little pipe with a cap on the end. I tried to undo the cap, and because the pipe was a bit rusted, it's just twisted off. And you can see in here, I can see it from the outside, somebody's tried to weld it up and block it up by just putting a tiny bit of Rio in and doing some booger weld around it. So we'll knock that back out and then we'll weld it up from the outside and the inside. Alright, let's grind that flush and plug it up. Alright, this is it on the outside. I think the trick is just to measure this, get some round stock that fits in there reasonably well, bevel it, weld it inside and out. The other option, if I could get a large enough tap, would actually be to tap it and put a bung in, which is quite tempting. This is the bit that came out. Obviously it's a bolt, and so it was the slightly larger head on the bolt that was helping fill the hole, but still pretty dodgy. So I found a bit of round stock, but it's a pretty good fit. Just gives you a bit of a gap to weld up. So I'm going to clean it up, then I will tack it inside. Actually, I'll weld it out completely inside. I'll tack it inside, check it outside, weld it out inside, then bring the little welder out. Then once this is all welded up, we can knock this little earth point off, grind it smooth and get some primer on it. I'm pretty sure I've now done all the pad welding I need to do, all the patching, at least for this outside of the hull below the transom. Actually, no, I haven't. I just remembered somewhere else. So I'll do a little bit of pad welding here, wasn't I? Used one of these, whatever they're called, sort of scouring pad type wheels on the grinder, take the rest of the paint off the transom. Now I'm going to run over it with the 40 grit orbital sander just to get it keyed for the epoxy. Right, what was I doing? I just went round with the grinder and the wire brush and ground off all the burnt paint so that I can put that extra layer of epoxy over the top. And now I'm just going to do an acetone wash to get all the dust and everything from up on the transom where I was doing all the sanding. Then we'll go mix up some epoxy. Oh, that hurt. When you take off a big chunk of skin with an angle grinder, then pour acetone on it. It hurts. I don't feel so tired anymore, it's working me up. And this is what it looks like now. Getting there. Well, thanks for watching. Next up I'm going to be doing a bit of fairing on the hull, so there's obviously still a bit of like an epoxy filler, then some undercoat, all that kind of stuff, but I feel now at least it's sort of sealed with a good coat of primer and I can relax about the hull a little bit. Next job is going to be blasting the inside of the engine bay, and I'll be doing that and painting, and while that's drying I'm finally going to get into servicing the Detroit diesel. With regards to the inspection hatches and cutting those gaskets, I've decided to leave the centre in one and cut the centre out of the other so we can use it as a bit of an experiment. People had some really good reasons why you should do either option, so I figure why not just do one of each and compare. I've also been looking into converting back to a dry exhaust to free up some of that space you saw today. There's a lot of complexities to going with a dry exhaust with regards to insulating it both from being touched and from touching the hull anywhere. It's not impossible, but it would take some work, but I've got a funny feeling it could really be worth it. So if anybody's got any really good experience with making up, fabricating a dry exhaust, I'd like to hear from you, to hear what you sort of think about converting it and what to keep an eye out for when designing the conversion. Alright, anyway, that's all next week, so take care and I'll catch you then. See ya.